Hello developers, testers, and everyone who likes game design.
Welcome to Studio Blues Podcast, DLC Not Included.
We're your hosts, Steele
And Teal.
Now our podcast discusses game development and industry topics.
In a relaxed fireside chat manner.
Talk a bit about our qualifications. I've been designing games for over 10 years and have been a professional writer for about as long, and a published author since about 2012.
I myself have been game designing as well as level designing for about 10 to 12 years, and I also enjoy modding games.
So we started this podcast in order to discuss these topics, and this is our second one. We've got some good feedback on the first one, so we're just going to jump right in.
Sounds good. So what's our topic today?
We're going to talk about level design fundamentals. We decided to do a more fundamental discussion because level design, like a lot in game development, is really broad.
It can be, and it's obvious when you're playing a game if the developer was organized or not.
Exactly. So we're going to talk a little bit about the, like I say, fundamentals of it in order to tackle methodology to this madness.
So the first thing you want to do, and I can't stress this enough if you're a developer, you have got to have a level design document. That is your big notebook or binder of your game.
Exactly. Now, the game design document is something that's different. We could get into that. That's its own podcast.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a huge topic.
We've done workshops on game design documents.
Yes.
Level design documents are a lot smaller because they pertain to that.
Just a level.
Right. And we do want to preface most of this conversation by saying that, kind of like writing and art, there's no real one way to level design.
But we have found that there are several key things that you want to do for level design, no matter what type of game you're tackling.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
To be honest with you, it took me a while to realize that level design starts with text and not a map. It really does.
Yeah, because when we started off developing games long ago, about over a decade ago, we would start with maps.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we would start with like the most complex, convoluted maps, done by man or God. I mean, it was. Y'all would die to see these maps.
They were, and whether it would be something as simple as a village in the middle of the woods, or a world map that would encompass, I think, what was it, Europe, Africa, and Asia?
Yeah, we were so ambitious. And that's where we started our game. We said, okay, we're going to make these world maps and then go from there. Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
And the story took a nosedive real quick.
It did.
And not to mention that we spent months on these maps, and then we ran out of time.
We did.
We started rushing at the end, and the game turned out.
Exactly. Because every time there was a mistake, because we had nothing to base the design off of, we literally had to redesign the map.
You had to redesign the map.
And it got really cumbersome really fast. The point of a level design document or any text-based beginning is to avoid having to do a lot of revisions. We're not talking about refinements. We're talking about recreation.
We're talking about redoing it from the ground up because of a screw-up in your intent, in your scripting, something... You put the wrong asset down. Anything can make it screw up, really.
Exactly. So it's taken us a while, and education as well, to be taught that really everything starts with text.
Yeah, text.
So when you want to start developing your levels, it's really a good idea and you don't have to follow a formal LDD if you don't want to, even a simple list, and I think the best place, Teal, to start would be your goals.
Yes. What is the goal of your level?
Right.
What is it that you want to accomplish with this level? Start with that. Yeah. Where does it fit inside your story? Of course, that's getting back to the big, what I call the big game design document, because all level design documents will fit inside your big game design document.
Exactly.
But having said that, what's the point of your level?
Right.
If your level doesn't have a point, why are you doing it?
Exactly. Like everything in writing and like everything in game design, if there's no point, it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
Remove it. And the best thing for me is to start with that main goal and an idea of the type of map, because, a lot of people probably are thinking, well, I don't need to have a goal if it's a town, but you do.
Yes, you do.
Absolutely. You have to have something in mind. Even if all they're doing in a town is pit stopping. Like, for example, you have a town in the middle of a giant forest.
Right.
So they enter the forest, they go through part of this forest dungeon.
Fighting.
They hit the town, and they can stop at the inn, buy supplies at the item shop.
That's the goal of your town.
Exactly.
That's your town goal. To stop, resupply, regroup, and then move on. That's fine. But again, a goal.
A goal. And it's all different. Linear progression, which would be things like your dungeons.
Kind of explain that a little bit, Steele. Linear progression.
Yeah, linear progression means that regardless of branching paths, you have a single start and a single end.
Okay.
That's a linear progression. Anything to where you start at one place and you end up at another place where your goal is. That's linear progression.
Yeah. So is there anything non-linear progression?
Yes, the non-linear progression would be things like your town.
Okay.
Towns have multiple entry points and multiple exit points. So, for example, when you go to a town, resupplying doesn't bring you to a boss.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't bring you to a rescued princess. You hope not. But it brings you to a series of places you can go to that furthers your progression through the game.
Yeah, it's a pit stop on your way from one place to another.
Exactly.
So, I understand, yeah.
Yeah, so non-linear progression would be like your towns or castles, that kind of thing. And then finally you would have your open progression, which would be like your world maps.
Yeah.
Your fields. Now, it doesn't have to be an open world like Skyrim or Fallout. For example, the original Legend of Zelda is a fantastic example. That's an open progression. You're on the overworld, you get your sword, you go out, you start exploring, but there are certain places that are locked you can't go into until you get candles, keys, magic wands, etc. Each one of these has goals.
True. Again, goals.
Right.
And which of these you use is determined by the story that you're telling.
Exactly. The point of all that is take your level, figure out what we're going to do with it, and write down what the main goals are.
Yeah.
Once you've taken these goals, you want to titrate them down into a series of steps. Again, we're still writing. We haven't actually mapped anything yet.
Yeah, this is all your text document that you're putting together.
Exactly. And again, you don't have to follow a level design document format. It could just be a list, like an outline. So you could have your main goals, and then you add your secondary and tertiary objectives, things that you have to fulfill in order to progress through the level.
I mean, we grab a notebook and we just start writing this stuff down and organizing it. And so it's all about breaking down your goals into the steps. Like Steele said.
It is. Add your optional goals, things that they don't have to do, but they get rewarded for. Make sure to add your obstacles and your rewards. So what type of puzzles or monsters would be in the way, or what type of fetch quests do they have to go on for the old man? What do they have to do in order to progress through the level? And what do they get versus what the risk is at every step of the way?
So those optional things is what really fleshes it out and makes your level interesting. But you should only add those after you've done your main goal, your main steps.
Agreed. That's why it's important to start in the macro and build yourself down bit by bit, adding more detail.
Yeah.
Those secondary and especially tertiary steps will save you so much time when you actually get into the engine.
Yeah.
Because you'll already know that in order to find the pendant for the old man, you have to first go talk to the young woman who saw the sneaky guy over by the well. Then you explore the well where you find the hermit, all these little pieces. And they'll all come together, and you'll know exactly how the player has to go through your level in order to progress in the game.
Right. And that's the most important thing is getting them through the level.
Yeah, it's basically a set of instructions is what it really comes down to, the level design document.
It is a set of instructions. Yeah, think about it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot more to it, and again, we could spend an entire podcast talking about the level design document.
Or make a workshop.
Exactly. Where you talk about things like the environment and the textures and the weather and the time scale and the monsters, all of that.
Oh.
We're not doing that.
Nah.
We're just talking about the fundamentals of the actual design of the level itself.
Right.
So you get all this stuff, you spent all this time in your Word document or your level design document or whatnot, and then finally you break out
the map.
Yep, graph paper.
Yes.
You don't do it in the engine.
No, heck no, you don't do this in the engine. The first thing you do, the first thing I do is I grab a piece of graph paper and I sketch out my map.
Yeah. Studio Blue has invested a ton of money in graph paper and binders.
Yes. So you just sketch out your basic map of your level. Whether it's a house or a town or a cave or a tree. I love trees.
Yes.
You sketch it out and just kind of block your assets where you think you're going to put furniture. Write down notes to yourself. What style is this level? You know, you got to think about these kind of things because that's going to determine your assets. You've got to take copious notes.
Copious notes. And you're following these lists that you've made, and you're building your map based off of the lists.
So, yeah, you sketch everything out. Look at your game design document and your level design document. Sketch these things out.
So, once you have your rough map created, then you need to clearly define your critical path. And we've talked about critical paths in our LPs before. The critical path is the path that the player has to take in order to complete the level. And this can be as complex as how they get through the forest to where they have to go in the house to find the pendant.
Right.
The critical path is where the player has to go. Then you can define optional paths, which are other places they can go to get other things.
But again, you're sketching all that out.
Exactly.
Okay, so that you clearly have something to work from when you actually go into the engine.
Another good thing, and this is just a sidebar, flowcharts can really help for complex levels.
That's right, yeah.
You benefit from a flowchart because it gives you a visual representation of what you wrote.
Yep. Anything to help you once you sit down. Because, man, when you're sitting there in front of your engine, you want to use your time to actually be making stuff in the engine. Not noodling around with it and trying to make decisions.
Teal actually brings up a really good point. If you're making design decisions by the time you're in the engine, and I mean major design decisions, then you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
So I think at this point, we've pretty much gone over all the real basics outside of the engine.
Outside the engine, yeah.
You know,
just
and
all the prep work that's involved before you actually sit down and physically make your game.
Yeah. So at this point, Teal, what happens?
At this point, you get to sit down in front of your engine and make your maps, which I love doing.
And we could probably have a podcast on map making. We really could.
I know we could. But the point of this podcast, I'll just touch on the highlights of mapping. The very first thing you do is you have your rough map in front of you and you start building your outline of your level. You build your outline.
I agree. You definitely want to build a wireframe of your level. Like you said, an outline. Here's in the cave where the starting point and the ending point are going to be.
That's very important, entrance and exit.
Oh yeah, especially for linear levels. Those dungeons, extremely important.
Once you've got that, then you can start placing your, what I call the static assets. What that means is the things that don't move, like houses, trees, statues, rocks, things like that. Things that aren't going to be moving. See, this stuff, think of it as your negative space. These things actually define visually where your walking path is.
Yeah. There's nothing in the world cheaper than when a level has something hidden so well that you don't know that you're supposed to go there.
Yep.
In the older days of game design, you know, like in the Legend of Zelda, for example, there used to be sections of the wall where you'd press against it for a couple of seconds, and then Link would go through the wall to another part of the map. Nowadays, that's just not good design.
That's terrible design, actually.
We've progressed past that.
We've progressed way past that.
And the thing is some developers will say, well, it was done in the 8-bit era or whatnot, so why can't I do it? The thing is we've learned since then what makes good design and what makes bad design.
So anyway, I could go on. I could talk about positive and negative space, but the point of your static assets is to, like I said, form the walking path that the PC takes that gets them through your level. Now, once you've done that, and you built all your static assets thing, then you can put your dynamic or your moving assets in. What are those? Those are NPCs, animals, platforms. That's what I mean by that. You add those in for visual interest as well as a vehicle to push your story forward.
But you also need to have little things like birds chirping around in the bushes, squirrels running around in the trees. All of those are your dynamic assets.
It gives life to your world. It gives life to that level.
Now, at this time, you're probably also going to want to look into basic particle systems, not the next step, we'll get to that, but things like water dripping. That would be a particle system or a sprite system in an RPG Maker engine where you have those extra little things that add to the atmosphere.
Swaying trees because the wind is blowing. And you talk about particle effects, flowers moving too. Pollen. So, yeah, all that is in there. You add that in to give life.
Yeah, give life.
To your map.
Exactly. At this point, you should be able to go into the engine and see some semblance of how the level is going to look.
Yeah.
Even if the NPCs are wandering around or if you're using an engine that uses AI packages.
True.
The goblin's just standing there in his idle pose. Things like that. That's fine.
That's fine.
Haven't programmed any AI in. All at this point you've done is you've put people in their starting points.
Yes.
And you're moving around to make sure that your level doesn't just look like, a bunch of rocks in a cave.
Yeah.
And if you're getting into a really high-end engine like a Unity or Unreal, you're adding in your moss on your rocks. You're adding in more detail.
Love that.
Things
Textures,
to actually bring that texture to life.
Okay.
So what's next, Teal?
Oh, the next is I like to do my light before I start programming it. I gotta have my lighting because a poorly lit level is a shitty level. And I'm being very honest there. And I'm not talking about, it's too dark or, it's too bright. I'm talking about when you're going through it and you have lights in the wrong place. It just doesn't feel right. You may have torches over here, but instead the light is off in another direction.
Or even worse, light coming from sources that don't actually exist.
Yeah, there's that too. It just, woo. That is your static lighting, is stuff like that. Dynamic lighting is light that moves around. A great example is a torch. Your character is holding a torch.
Right.
So as they move along, they have a ring of light around them, and so they can see in their immediate area, but it's darker beyond the range of that torch.
And that's really helpful in more advanced engines, including virtual reality.
Sure.
Where you have to be able to physically see a location because of the light. That's very important as well. So take into account when you're developing the level how those dynamic sources will matter, and change things up is also important.
So it, like I said, it doesn't matter what type of level you're designing, whether it's a cave or a town or a house. You've got to make sure before you do any programming that lighting is right.
I have to agree. In my film background, I learned that lighting can make or break anything, no matter how good it is.
It sure can. I mean, you could have the most beautiful level in the world, very, very organized, but if you have crappy lighting, your whole level, it just...
The quality drops significantly very quickly. Shadows add texture.
They sure
Lighting
do.
adds texture. And I've noticed that you can really tell how long someone's been developing as to how much time they spend on the lighting.
Yeah. Lighting is so important. I would say spend a considerable amount of time on it so that you get it right. don't move on until you do have their perfectly lighted space.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that goes for everyone, not just the 3D game engines, but the 2D as well.
2D as well.
Whether it be Game Studio, RPG Maker, it doesn't matter. Use lighting mods, whatever.
Yeah.
To accomplish good lighting. It will set your game apart.
So, yeah, once you get your lighting down and you pretty much crafted your set. Your set is ready for your actors. Now it comes the fun part, the programming. I love sprite programming. Mm-hmm. Especially love programming NPCs. I like programming their movements. Yes, you will be programming an NPC's movement. And you can get as broad as, okay, I have this AI, and you can use an AI package and just give it a few basic commands and let it go on its way. Or, do like me, I get very granular with it, and I actually set the NPC's path completely. And I always like to have a basic circular path for my NPCs so that they can be encountered by the PC at any point in their path.
Independent of the engine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter the engine. I just like to do that. But I always like to make sure that my NPCs are doing something.
Yes,
okay,
I agree.
So if the NPCs are in a town, then I'm going to have an old man NPC sprite walking around the market. He'll stop at a stall for X number of seconds, and then he'll move on. And I even program NPCs to encounter each other, to stop, have a conversation, and then move in another direction.
Exactly. You never want to have a NPC just standing there.
Never, never, never.
Yeah. It's a little easier in 3D, I've learned, because then you can have idle animation loops. Some sort of idle animation is important.
Yes, it is, because that shows
life. And as you know, Teal and I play a lot of games. One of the games that we're playing recently that for me handles idle animations really well was Elder Scrolls Online.
That's true.
The NPC characters will be there, and they'll take out a blade and start sharpening it, or they'll put it away and take out a mug and drink something, or they'll look around, or they'll stretch.
Yeah.
You know, these are just different idle animations that go along with the standard standing there and breathing.
That's what makes working in 3D so much fun, because you can have more complex movements. You really can't do that in a 2D engine.
But, and this is what Teal and I have learned over the years, you can do other things.
Sure you can.
Whether you have them look around or blink.
Blink.
Or breathe.
Blinking is good.
Or lower their weapon and bring their weapon back up. Some little thing that shows that they're alive and they're not just a sprite. And this is going back to people saying, well, back in the day of Final Fantasy VI, people used to stand. Well, we're past that.
We are so past that.
So instead of having your shopkeeper just standing there behind the counter, have them
wipe the counter.
Have the person, instead of them standing off in the corner, sweeping the corner.
Yeah.
Just little things. Yes, it takes more effort. We recognize that. But at the same time, you have a more living world.
Yes, you do. Now, programming is not just about sprite movement. Programming is also dialogue, as well as in 2D games, like RPG Maker. I like to describe objects. Like when you go up to an object and you press X,
right?
A little box comes up with the object description. Yes, I like to describe everything. Some people don't describe a whole lot, which is fine. I hate to see games that don't have any descriptions at all, because when you're in a 2D game, you've got to do everything you can to make this environment come alive. It's so much easier in 3D.
Because as Teal says, those are tiny little sprites. We can't really figure out what they are outside of, okay, it's a cabinet. Okay, that's a shelf.
Yeah.
What purpose does it serve in the world? Add a description. In 3D, you don't really have to do that.
You don't have to do that in 3D.
Because it's a lot easier to see what something is.
Yeah, I mean, you only have so many bookcases to choose from. So you can utilize that asset, program in the dialog box, either a description of the bookshelf, what kind of books are in it, or you can utilize that bookcase as an info font.
Exactly. Continues going on programming.
Yes.
Once you've got those NPCs programmed, you can start programming the environment, and you can start putting in things like lore and environmental storytelling.
Absolutely. You're using your level design to harken back to what's the goal of this level. You're imparting knowledge to further the player as well as the PC's knowledge of what's going on and what's the point of them being there.
Exactly. And you want to make your dialogue be dynamic as well.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the world more, whether it be an RPG or an adventure or anything, there's nothing more irksome than when you talk to an NPC and they say the exact same thing over and over again, no matter what.
Times are tough.
Thank you. Thank you. So
Times are tough.
So you want to add dynamicism to NPC dialogue as well. And again, wow, that's another podcast. I mean, we can talk about that for hours. So all of these things kind of come together.
It all comes together.
And it builds you to your level, which leads us to our last step.
Yep. Testing. Oh, I can't say this enough. You need to test your level to make sure that there's no glitches, that you didn't screw up some kind of scripting or code in there. Everything has got to move, flowing and I don't know. You've got to test it repeatedly to make sure that it all goes as you envisioned it.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about testing the path. We're not just talking about testing the lighting. We're talking about testing everything.
Everything.
This is where beta testers will really come in handy because you have in your head your vision.
Yep.
But whether or not you're translating that vision properly over to this visual media, you can't critique yourself after a while. So you want to get someone else to help. And again, that's not the topic for another day, but it's important that you test your level thoroughly for everything.
Absolutely.
And once you're done doing that, let other people.
Well, you test all the dialogue, everything. Talk to every person or creature that's supposed to have dialogue. Make sure that's on par. Look at your level. Is the wind moving the trees that you had set in there, or is nothing happening?
Right.
Can you walk through walls?
Can you walk on the walls?
Oh my gosh.
I've seen that happen a couple of times. So you're not just bug testing. A lot of people think that testing a level is bug testing. You're not. You're testing the whole level.
Yeah.
Every bit of it. Use the debug mode that your engine comes with, because I can't think of an engine that doesn't come with a debug mode nowadays.
Yeah, everything
And
is.
change your level flags /switches /variables to progress through your game.
Yeah.
And see how things change. Test everything.
Yeah.
Because that one thing that pulls the player out is that one thing that just lost your player.
Yep. One mistake, one glitch. One misspelled word. Yes, please proofread all of your text, your exposition, your dialogue. Please.
You go through a lot of testing,
Yeah.
then you change things, then you test some more, then you change some more. And at a certain point when your level is finished, and I'm using air quotes, you move on to your next level and you start your process over again. And the next level you design, if it's connected to the level you just made, it needs to be a cohesive change from one to the other.
Oh yeah, transitions are so important.
Cannot tell you how many times Teal and I have reviewed a product where there's a stark difference between one map and the next.
Ouch.
And it's very painful.
Oh, that is painful.
And we're not just talking about big, huge picture things like walking from a snowfield to a desert. Most people aren't going to make that mistake. We're talking about things like, for example, the path on one forest being not equal to the path on the other, or the interior of the house being way bigger than the exterior.
Yeah, this isn't the TARDIS. It really irks me when we exit a map from the east and the next map we're approaching it from the south.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
So, and really, I think mapping will probably be a topic we tackle in a future podcast.
I think so, yeah.
Because there are so many do's and don'ts there. The point that I'm trying to make is that when you do level design, your work on level A never truly ends, because level A will influence B, C, etc.
True. I mean, you may go back and tweak it.
Right.
But you won't get lost in the middle of your designing your engine if you have your level design document.
Yeah.
Bottom line, you will not be lost.
So that brings us pretty much to the end of this particular podcast because we've been over the fundamentals of level design, and I feel like we just scratched the surface of a very complex topic.
We have. We could do all kinds of things with mapping and design and lighting and stuff, but we just want to keep this broad.
Yeah,
kind of a broad overview.
Yeah.
Really don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that.
Right. If you do want a particular level design topic to be discussed, be sure to let us know, because this is like game design and other elements. It can go anywhere.
It's pretty fluid. The main point that we wanted to make was that you need to be very organized before you sit down and do any actual mapping, and you want to have your document and all your steps in front of you.
Yeah.
Like I said, you don't want to get lost. Yeah.
The more organization and preparation you do before you open up that engine, the better your model's going to be.
You don't want to sit there and waste time.
Great. All right, well, this is the end of our second podcast.
Yeah.
We've received good feedback. Please give it up. Let us know where we're doing. Let us know what we can do to improve, and let us know if topics you'd like us to tackle.
Yep.
We plan on taking this as far as we can go, so thank you very much so far for everyone who's been watching and listening. And we look forward to our next time. So join us next time for DLC Not Included. And remember,
anyone can give you the key, but you have to go through the door.